Welcome to another episode of the cut content of Spec Ops The Line. And today we're going to be visiting a very special topic, one that Walt Williams covered in his book Significant Zero. This is the DLC based around Lieutenant Adams, called Long Way Home. Before the concept was cut, Spec Ops was supposed to have some DLC. One of the additions was going to be a 5-level expansion that would have focused on Adams if he had survived the events of the game. As you know, Adams is in a final shootout with the 33rd when he forces Walker to run to Conrad's tower. The 33rd bombard him with everything they have, and we hear a chopper go down. It's easy to assume that Adams died, but this DLC would have assumed that he survived. The explosions knocked him out of the tower, burned him badly, and launched him into the river nearby. So, he ended up horribly scarred to the point of being almost unrecognizable, but still alive. And so the DLC would have explored the idea, would it really be worse if he woke up scarred and alive, or if he had simply died there in his final stand against the 33rd. The premise of the DLC would have been that Adams wakes up to find Dubai in a state of relative calm, that the carnage brought on by Walker in the main game has brought a semblance of peace. There's so few left because of his actions. The survivors are making their way out of the city. The sandstorm raging might kill them, but death is certain if they don't try. Adams is unrecognizable at this point. He attempts to leave Dubai by pretending to be one of Conrad's men. Along the way, he meets Sergeant Paza, a young member of the damned 33rd. Adams can't help but see echoes of Lugo in Sergeant Paza. Somehow, the horrors of Dubai have not touched his youthful optimism. Adams came to Dubai to save people, but instead brought pain and suffering to everyone he met. Rescuing Paza is his last chance to do something good. The DLC ends with Adams and Paza passing safely through the sandstorms surrounding Dubai. For Adams, his mission is finally over. He uses his radio to call for an evacuation. As Adams talks, Lieutenant Paza realizes this man, his savior, is not who he claimed to be. Paza raises his pistol. Adams turns to face him, weapon already drawn. They lock eyes. Adams shakes his head, as if to say not yet. Adams finishes his report. Help is on the way. He shuts off the radio and lets fall from his hand, almost thoughtlessly. It lands in the sand at his feet. In the ensuing conversation, Adams confirms that he lied to Paza. He throws away his gun, leaving him unarmed as Paza trains his own on him. Adams wants him to go home and be better than what happened in Dubai. At this point, Adams can't go on. He tells Paza to aim at an area around his torso so that he'll bleed out, and he wants Paza to tell them that he got injured during the evacuation attempt and they couldn't save him. The script ends without it making clear whether or not Adams dies or Paza follows through with it. But it seems like Walt Williams wanted to permanently close this chapter on Adams. As he notes in his book, subtlety had never been his strongest suit. This was my cry for help. I couldn't write Spec Ops anymore. My characters had to die so I could get them out of my head. And this was after years of development on Spec Ops, serious health issues, and some crunch time near the end. Williams was definitely at the end of his rope. The script ended up never getting used, even though it was apparently finished. There's an excerpt of it within his book, which is interesting. The Darkness 2 also had a similar situation where DLC was planned for it, but never went through. It was published by the same company, and coincidentally, Walt Williams also wrote part of it. He handled the lore for the collectible items, and he wrote the co-op campaign for it. So, what all can we take away from this? We know that the DLC would have been 5 missions long because Walt Williams specifically notes this within the book. We know that it would have had Adams as the playable character. Presumably, Pazza would have been a squad mate, just like how it was with Adams and Lugo when you played as Walker, or in the final chapters where you just had Adams by your side. There are some early screenshots where it looks like you're playing as Adams that was probably left over for a co-op mode. So the question is, in this DLC, who would have you been fighting? It sounds like there aren't many people left in Dubai after all the destruction that Delta and everybody else caused. My guess would be that if you're trying to help a member of the 33rd evacuate people, I doubt you would have been fighting the regular aspects of the 33rd again, so my assumption would be you'd either fight the refugees again, the looters, marauders, whatever you call them, possibly the exiles. If there are any of them left, I could see them making a last-ditch effort to stop the damned from accomplishing their mission. Maybe being crazy enough to believe that they needed to die there in Dubai, rather than get out in the world and let their crimes be known. Or maybe it could have been an entirely new faction. Maybe some other element of the American government sent in to cover up the incident. Or it could be local Dubai authorities. There are some audio tapes that you can find that depict a cover-up going on, and people like aid workers being executed by the authorities in Dubai. Anything's possible. It doesn't specify within the book how it was going to go, who you're going to fight. So that aspect is speculation. Another thing that is worth speculating about, but seems likely, is the presence of the Flamer Heavy Trooper. There's artwork that I've shown before of a heavy enemy that would have used a flamethrower. A flamethrower was cut from Spec Ops, as I mentioned in a previous video. It's mentioned that this heavy flamethrower enemy would have been featured in a DLC on the artist's website. The DLC itself was never specified. It's possible it could have been for something else entirely. Maybe a scrapped element of the co-op DLC we got, or something else. But the only one I know for certain about is that we could have gotten an Adams DLC that never got released. So my money is on him being an antagonist, and a special enemy you would fight. If that's the case, the flamethrower might have returned for this DLC, and that also might have indicated that we would have fought the 33rd. Maybe my speculation's wrong. It's tough to tell because there are only so many specific aspects brought up here within the book. Some other important points are that there were other ideas that Walt Williams considered. He considered doing a prequel about Conrad and the damn 33rd going to war against the CIA Grey Fox Squad. But Williams, the idea had no meat to it. He thought the prequels were pretty pointless, and that everything worth seeing was already in the original story. He wanted to do a sequel story or some sort of narrative coda, like follow what happened to the characters after the game ended, which led to him focusing on Adams because his survival seemed most plausible. Walker's fate was decided by the player, and Lugo was dead no matter what. The concept of DLC around the 33rd going to war with Grey Fox is interesting, because that's sort of the premise of the Exodus co-op campaign that got cut, except you were doing that from the perspective of Grey Fox. I'm not sure if that was supposed to be an homage to it, or if it's just a coincidence that that's brought up. As far as I know, reading through this, Exodus isn't brought up. The development of Spec Ops definitely had a fascinating history behind it, and there are some other tidbits in here that are worth exploring. But facts that I can tell are, you played as Adams, DLC would have been 5 missions long, you probably would have been accompanied by that Lieutenant Pazza guy, or wait, Sergeant Pazza. It's written both ways in here, that's strange. Anyway, the point is that it would have most likely ended with Adams dying as well, having completed his mission and basically lost the will to keep going. It would have ended tragically, but that's a lot of what Spec Ops is. The best ending you could get out of it was a very bleak, bittersweet ending. And maybe it was the closure Adams needed. It was definitely the closure that Walt Williams needed. Reading through this, the trials and tribulations of making Spec Ops The Line was truly fascinating. I'd highly recommend picking up a copy of Significant Zero when you get the chance. It's a nice insight into the development process of games, what it's like to pitch them, what it's like to work on them, be bounced around from project to project, and to see how things evolve over time within a company you work for. I read through it. I mostly focused on the Spec Ops stuff, but I want to return at some point and read the early chapters. So, what do you guys think about this DLC? What all would it have entailed? And who do you think Adams would have fought? And do you think Adams would have actually died at the end? Or would that have been left up to the player to decide? The script itself doesn't say specifically whether Adams gets shot at the end. So I'd love to hear your opinions and feedback. Thanks again for watching this video, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Cut Content with Spec Ops The Line. Have a good day, everybody.